Now let's dive into the Rams. Now they got two really good receivers, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. Van Jefferson's going to get a chance to step up to the plate with Josh Reynolds gone. And this is a team that they lost a lot of talent just across the board. I mean, let's rattle off some of these names. The safety, Johnson, Brockers was a really good defensive lineman. You know, this team, the depth, I feel like, is depleted.
So that's what's very interesting about the Rams. The Rams are a team that, well, if you look at the top, they look very good. Like, they still have a very strong team. They obviously have the star power in Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald and Matt Stafford. And we know how good those receivers can be. And McVay is a great play caller. They have a lot of things going for them. But the biggest thing that's going to get me is how is that defense is almost assuredly going to regress, because it's very rare that you see a defense, even the great defenses like the Bucs in the early 2000s, the Ravens, the Bears, all these teams that had these great defenses, they might have maintained a top 5, top 7 ranking, but there hardly ever is a defense that's number 1 back-to-back years. So it's almost like a guarantee the Rams will regress, literally, because it's that hard to be just the best defense again. But I'm interested to see how much they regress, because you mentioned they lost John Johnson, they lost Michael Brockers, they lost Troy Hill, who was quietly a really good corner for them as well, and they lost Brandon Staley, who had this really great mesh of kind of Vic Fangio, who 49ers fans remember, who called some great defenses for us, kind of a mix of his system and a lot of what Nick Saban does in coverage, and it was kind of the best of both worlds, and he really was kind of ahead of the curve. Generally, offenses are the teams that are the units, that are setting the tone, and defenses have to react. The defenses catch up. When I was watching the Rams last year, it really felt like Brandon Staley was ahead of a lot of these offenses with the coverages he was calling, with the defensive fronts he was throwing out there. So I'm really interested to see what Raheem Morris, the new defensive coordinator, who's been in the league for a long time, has been a head coach, is definitely a guy who has a lot of respect around the league. I don't think it's just going to be this huge drop-off, but I think there are some huge shoes to fill on that defense. But while you have Aaron Donald and while you have Jalen Ramsey, it's just going to put you in a position where those guys are going to command so much attention that it's going to make other guys better. But I am with you. I think the depth is going to be a little bit – it's going to be concerning that the depth really isn't there. And then you also have the guy that was pulling all the strings for this number 1 defense last year, who's now the head coach of the Chargers. So I think the defense is going to be where they really struggle. The offense, I expect to actually take a step forward, just because I think that, I'm wearing my Cal shirt right now. I like Jared Goff, but I don't think he's the same caliber of quarterback that Matthew Stafford is. So I'm kind of terrified to see what McVay is going to do with a guy like Stafford, just because of the arm talent he has. I don't think he's remarkably, more efficient or anything than Goff is. I think Goff actually gets kind of a bad rep just because of how he played the last couple of years. But, they got to a Super Bowl with him. We saw when Goff was on, he was more than capable of starting NFL quarterback. I just think that Matthew Stafford has the arm talent to allow him to get a little bit more creative. His biggest thing is just staying durable, in my opinion. I think that a lot of his inconsistency stemmed from the fact that he was getting hurt quite a bit, and he was just so tough that he was still out there playing with torn ligaments in his thumb and injuries with his back and his shoulder and all these things, where he's not making the excuse. But I think that has a lot to do with his play. And I just think he was also inconsistent, just not making excuses for him. There's a lot of times where he was week to week, his efficiency would fluctuate. So, that's the interesting thing with me with Stafford, because if you look at him, he has all the arm talent in the world. The guy can make throws. The only other quarterbacks, I think, in the league that are on the same par of arm talent are Mahomes and Rodgers, just purely based on the angle, the difficulty, the depth, so many of the things he can do with his arm. He's in that elite tier, but the other guys have the efficiency and the consistency, which is what separates them. And as much as
the other guys get more primetime games, and they go deeper into the playoffs. So we see, he's hiding up in the NFC the NFC North for so long that we missed out on seeing that cannon, because you're absolutely right about that.
And the thing is too is how much do we put into the fact that the Detroit Lions, no offense to anybody who's a Lions fan out there, I hope they turn it around. How much stock do we put into the fact that team has been tanking Hall of Fame careers for decades now? And the fact that they haven't really been able to get it together. Again, I don't want to make excuses, because he has had a couple teams that are very good. People will point out he had Calvin Johnson to throw the ball to. I think even his most recent receiving units, having Galladay, having Marvin Jones, Amendola, like a lot of these guys he was throwing to, they're not scrubs, but I just wonder, like who's the most creative offensive mind he's worked with. In my eyes, it's Jim Caldwell, and they didn't really have that much time together. The short time they did have, I think they went 9-7, and the year he got fired. Like they weren't a great team, but they also weren't awful. But he's had guys like Jim Schwartz and Rod Marinelli, and most recently, Matt Patricia, like a lot of defensive-minded guys. So I'd be really interested to see what goes on when he's getting a head coach and a play caller who really has established themselves as a bright offensive mind who has the creativity and the ability to really, take an offense to another level. So that's one of the things I'm most excited about to watch this year is what are McVay and Stafford, what's that pairing really going to look like?
Absolutely. And I feel like the offensive line for the Rams usually gets a bad rap, right? Now, how do you think it kind of stacks up now?
So Whitworth has been insane. Like at a certain point, he's going to have to just regress because the man's going to be 40 this year during the season. I don't think I can't remember the last time I've seen an offensive line play as well as he's played this late into their career. I don't want to doubt him, but I'm not going to count on him to continue to play at that high level. It's just unrealistic to expect a 40-year-old man who has that many miles on his body at the NFL level to continue to play at the high level that he's played at. So he's the strongest, the anchor of that line, in my opinion. Still, I believe he's still a team captain. So he still is going to command a lot of respect from defense, command a lot of respect in the locker room. But just from a purely play standpoint, like talent on the field, the unit as a whole really doesn't do much for me. I think that they played a lot better this past season than they did in 2019. They had a really rough year, which is part of the reason why I think they missed the playoffs. That O-line just was depleted, and the guys that were filling in weren't great. I think Corbett's taken a step forward. Havenstein has played a little bit better. And then, this is a great point, too, about losing the center. The center does so much for them that it's going to be interesting to see how whoever ends up winning that job stepping in does. But, it's more just like, can they not be a detriment? Like, I don't think it's going to be a strength of the team, but as long as they're not the reason that they're losing games, which is what I think happened in 2019, I think that they'll be okay. But, if we're comparing them, head-to-head, the 49ers have a much better offensive line, in my opinion. I think even Seattle, you could argue, has a better line than them, in my opinion. And that's where it's kind of these are the little things where, while, there's questions around the quarterback room and what's going to happen, this is where I'm feeling confident as a 49ers fan that the depth of all these units, they just seem stronger to me. While some of these other teams may be more top-heavy, the Niners have a stronger offensive line. In my opinion, they have a stronger defensive line. And having that strength in the trenches, I think, goes so far in this league, especially now with the longer seasons. It's going to be very key to have that depth and have that strength on the front on both sides. So, the line for doesn't do anything for me. The skill position group is really what I think stands out. Now, I would take A.J. Brown and Julio Jones over anybody in terms of just pure receiving, duos.
That's a scary tandem, yeah.
Yeah, and Lockett and Metcalf are obviously very good. Godwin and Mike Evans are very good. Landry and Beckham, when they're healthy, are very good.
Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, Thielen and Jefferson. Yeah, it's another really good. But Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, in my opinion, I've argued, and I floated it out there last year. A lot of people disagreed. I said you could argue that they are the most complete wide receiver duo in the league. And my reasoning is that they both do so many things very well, and they're both very similar. They both can run that motion pre-snap. They both can dominate you after the catch if you get them in space. They both have dependable hands. And it puts you in a position, while they may not be this bona fide wide receiver one that's a DK Metcalf or a Julio Jones or a Michael Thomas, whoever you want to throw out there, but they're both, it's like having 2 1Bs almost. And I think that's almost harder because if you try to take away a Cooper Kupp, then Robert Woods ends up torching. If you try to take away a Robert Woods, the other guy ends up torching. And it's really hard to try to decide, in my opinion, when you are game planning for these guys. Who am I really going to focus my coverage schemes on? Who am I really going to make an effort to take away? Just because they're both, like I said, they're both not transcendent players, but they're both highly above average players who I don't think get enough credit, particularly Robert Woods. Robert Woods might be the most underrated player in the league, in my opinion, just strictly based on the production he puts out every year and how dependable he's been since he's come to the Rams. And I'm a big fan of Van Jefferson's too. I think that he's going to end up slotting into a nice role with them. Again, I will pull for any Cal guy. I love Deshaun Jackson. I don't know how much he has left in the tank, but if he has anything to offer them just in terms of stretching the field a little bit, it'd be very interesting to see how they work him vertically while having Kupp and Woods working horizontally. So the skill position group looks really good. And I think Higbee is a decent tight end too. McVay doesn't really seem keen on getting the tight end involved on a consistent basis.
And they lost Everett. I did like Gerald Everett, who's staying in the division. We'll talk about him in a second, but they lost Gerald Everett. Now, we got to touch on the running backs real quick because they got a tandem that I think is a bit underrated. Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson are two running backs that I think they're pretty good.
Yeah, Akers. So Akers is really interesting to me because I thought with him coming, I played dynasty football, so I spent a lot of time watching college strictly based on my own selfish interest of trying to get ahead of rookie drafts and stuff like that. And while everybody was focused on Jonathan Taylor and Clyde Edwards-Helaire got a lot of late love, I thought that Akers was the most complete back coming out of that class, and I thought that Florida State, while they've just been, sorry if there's any Florida State fans watching, they've just been a mess for whatever reason since Jimbo Fisher left. And the offensive line looked awful. The offense as a whole didn't look great with Akers, but he had really good hands, very good runner. And I thought despite the bad O-line play, he still looked really good. So I was literally, for my fantasy football selfishness, I was very happy when he went to the Rams because I'm like, okay, this is a great landing spot for him. But from just a purely 49ers fan, selfish standpoint, I was very worried because I think he's a guy, while he may not be what Todd Gurley was before his knees gave out, he's going to give them that level of consistent production, in my opinion. And I think, we as 49ers fans give Shanahan a lot of credit for putting players in a position to succeed. And I think that Sean McVay deserves as much, if not more, of that same credit as well, where you can really just plug guys into that system and he's going to put them in a position to produce. But Akers showed down the stretch last season and into the playoffs. He's a guy who really can be a dependable workhorse. And then you have Henderson with that change of pace, quick twitch. I think he's an underrated receiver. I think he brings a little change of pace to what Akers is doing. So, yeah, I'm not thrilled to see this offense. I think that it's going to, watching that Niners defense versus that Rams offense is going to be one of the more intriguing matchups I think we see during the season. And seeing the chess match between Sean McVay and what DeMeco Ryans is going to be doing as a first-year defensive coordinator will be very fun to watch. The skill position guys are really what gets me. But if the Niners can dominate in the trenches, which I believe they will be able to, just again because this Rams O-line, I don't know what to expect. Is it going to be even closer to the 2019 year when they were a little bit of a detriment to the offense? Are they going to, maintain that kind of average level of play they had last year where it was good enough just to get them into the playoffs because they weren't losing them games? That, to me, I can't confidently give a prediction where I think it's going to go one way or the other. I think it'll fall a little bit closer to that 2019. I think they will regress a little bit from last year, but I'm not expecting them to be, costing them games the way it did look like it was happening in 2019, where they had injuries and the guys who were playing were just getting beat so badly that, Goff was essentially just taking free rushers on a lot of the time.
Absolutely. I really love that input. Now, moving to the defense, they got two guys. When I'm looking at this D-line, they got two studs. Obviously, one of them is arguably the best defensive player in football, and that's Aaron Donald. But Leonard Floyd is also a really good pass rusher, really good player. But outside of that, A'Shawn Robinson, Sebastian Joseph Day, Okoronkwo. I botched that one, Jordan. But what do you see from this defensive line outside of Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd?
So the interesting thing with Aaron Donald is, and this is another reason why I hate using sacks to measure any kind of pass rush production, D-line production, outside linebacker, edge, whatever. I hate using sacks because sacks are so dependent on the supporting cast. So you have a guy a couple years ago, if you remember, Dante Fowler gets traded to the Rams. He comes in. I forget what numbers he put up, but he put up respectable numbers. He ended up generating a lot of sacks. He ends up signing a contract with Atlanta, and immediately when he doesn't have Aaron Donald next to him, he regresses significantly. He's not posting the same sack numbers. He's not posting the same, box score production numbers. But if you look closer at the pressures, his pressures were pretty much the same in Atlanta as they were in LA, meaning his individual production didn't change much. The difference is when you have Aaron Donald on your team and the guy's getting doubled every snap and on some plays is getting triple teamed, eating up the majority of an offensive line by himself, it's going to open up opportunities. Like, I don't think I've ever seen a player command as much attention against an interior offensive line the way that Aaron Donald has in his career.
Yeah,
like,
if you're trying to block this guy one-on-one, you are asking for trouble.
Unless you're Daniel Brunskill. Daniel Brunskill seems to be a kryptonite, but that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, like that's one thing for me that it's fascinating to watch because there's a lot of guys. Lawrence Taylor is, in my opinion, still undisputedly the best defensive player of all time. Deion Sanders, if you're more of a coverage guy, has an argument too. I wouldn't be upset at either answer. But right beneath that, Reggie White was a phenomenal player. I think that Aaron Donald, if he maintains this productivity over the next few seasons, has a serious case to be made for one of, if not the greatest defensive players of all time. So having said that, and again, that's no disrespect, I still think Lawrence Taylor and Deion Sanders are marginally ahead of him. But I think that at a certain point, he's due that respect, just having seen this year in, year out. And if you have him on your team, it makes it easier to have lesser-known players on the line. Because, again, if you look at that unit, nobody else is really jumping out at you. Leonard Floyd is a former first-round pick. He has a lot of physical gifts. He's another guy where I'd be really interested to see if you took away Aaron Donald, is he posting the same pressure numbers and the same sack numbers that he would get with the benefit of having somebody like Donald command so much attention? I personally don't think he would. But, again, that's
Bears fans will tell you the answer is no.
Exactly. So that's the Rams, and hey, they have Aaron Donald, so they don't have to worry about these hypotheticals that I'm throwing out there. The group that really gets me is the linebacking group, and I think that is where it's almost like the Rams have subscribed to this theory that I know a lot of analytics people think. I'm into analytics myself. I try to stay plugged in, but I don't subscribe to everything that they float out there. But I do know a lot of analytics people think that linebackers in particular. There's a couple guys. There's Darius Leonard, Fred Warner, Levante David. Some people really like Devin White.
Bobby Wagner.
I'd say. Like guys you can count on one hand who are just game-changing, transcendent talents.
Let me guess. Otherwise, you tank it.
Exactly. So it's essentially a position that's so hard to hit on and get that elite-level player that I'm wondering if the Rams are honestly making a concerted effort where they're like, hey, we're going to invest a bunch of money and capital into the secondary, and that's what they did by getting Jalen Ramsey. We're going to invest in getting a secondary piece for Aaron Donald and invest in Aaron Donald, and that's how they have him and Floyd. And if they've just literally just said, hey, the linebacker position, whatever happens, happens. Because ever since they've, I like Corey Littleton a lot, but ever since they've lost him, it's really just been kind of like a black hole on the roster where there's just this like interchanging group of guys that aren't really household names or not. And it's not that they're not household names, they're guys that just aren't really good NFL players in my, humble opinion for whatever it's worth. And I'm wondering if that's like a concerted effort and we do know that they're in a kind of a cap struggle, and that's why they've had to let a lot of guys go. So it's not like they're at liberty to spend a bunch of money on linebackers or capital on linebackers, and they're opting not to. But I'm wondering if they've just literally pushed it so far down the list of things that they're concerned with in terms of roster building. Because if you look at that, it's not a great unit. And even now, the secondary. Now that Troy Hill and John Johnson are gone, John Johnson, in my opinion, is one of the best. He's top 5 safety in football, and I think losing him is going to be a big loss. I think that's one that doesn't
Jordan. Yesterday, I was checking out. Friday, I was looking at the AFC and the Browns. The Browns are freaking loaded.
They have a very good team. They've done a very good job building, and that defense in particular, they've done a really nice job building it together.
Yeah. Okay. Back to the Rams. Yeah, you said the secondary. We know they got Jalen Ramsey in the secondary. What do they have outside of that?
In my opinion, they don't really so it'll be really interesting to see. I like Taylor Rapp a lot. I'd be interested to see if they have Taylor Rapp playing more of a I don't say free safety, but more of a coverage, safety. I think a lot of those traditional free, strong safety, a lot of the traditional positional molds are kind of gone by the wayside. So I'd be interested to see if he does end up getting a little bit more run. I think he's a little bit more athletic. I think Jimmy Lake has done a great job with a lot of those defensive backs coming out of Washington. You've seen Buda Baker come out. I'm a big Elijah Molden fan. I think he'll end up being great for the Titans this year. So, I'm just at the point where, I'm not going to doubt them because consistently every year they end up being a contender. They end up being a team that you have to respect. But I also watched the Niners beat them with a hobbled roster last year twice in a situation where it just felt like they were being out-muscled. And that's the biggest thing for me is I think that the Niners have a strength, not like, a literal strength, not, I'm not using it as an adjective. Like, they're literally a stronger team across the board, and they have more depth that I think that that's going to ultimately end up playing in their favor when you have these divisional matchups where you're so familiar with scheme and you're so familiar. Like McVay and Shanahan know what each other like to do. They're very familiar with one another. But when you're able to just kind of beat up another team and punch them in the mouth, I think that the Niners have that ability with their offensive and defensive lines, and I don't feel like the Rams have the same outside of standouts like Aaron Donald and Andrew Whitworth.